Okay, uh, here's today's topic. It's actually a good one. And it comes up a lot at boat shows. People grab me at boat shows, and it's a pretty common question, actually. I've been dealing with it for a long time. How big can a boat be that two people can comfortably handle it? All right, you know, and that's a bit of a moving target, that question, and that issue. Uh, because when I started Shannon back in 1975, I was absolutely convinced that 38 feet was the largest boat two people could handle comfortably and safely. By the way, when we're talking about two people sailing, handling a boat, basically I always think of it as one person being able to handle the boat, and one person taking a break, one person down in the galley, one person taking a nap, and the other person having to drive and steer and reef and do all of that. So there's a little bit of an overlap between two people and single handing, but it all amounts to be the same thing. Uh, so I believed with all my heart that 38 feet was the size. And at the time it was, because we did not have roller furling sails, we did not have self-tailing winches, we did not have single line reefing, we didn't have, navigating was a whole different deal when we were doing celestial and radio directional finders. So there were a lot of issues to determine the size. Windlasses were mostly manual at that time, where you were cranking something, so anchoring was an issue. So every bit of it had to do with size. Now we have roller furling, and now we have roller furling that is actually dependable, that you can handle and manage sails with. We've got self-tailing winches, so one person can winch the boat. We have autopilots now that are dependable. We were using self-steering gear, vanes off the back of the boat, and those things were, a constant nightmare of jerking around with lines and fooling with it and everything. It didn't draw any electric, but meanwhile, it took, it made your brains fall out trying to get the boat to steer using a wind vane. We now have autopilots that work very, very well. So the size issue has changed because of technology and equipment, and everything has changed. I'm at this a long time, so I don't expect anybody watching this. I've been sailing for over 45 years, so I don't expect anybody to think I'm average. So I don't have any difficulty pushing a 53-foot boat around with just me and my wife. And I'm not some 17 or 18-year-old rock star sailor Olympic jumping around, and I'm heavily reliant on all of that stuff working. The size issue is as much psychological as it is physical. I think two people can handle a 53-foot boat. I think if you get much bigger, it isn't a question of sailing the boat or getting somewhere with the boat. You start getting into some docking issues and things that start to limit the size. And since we're running a camera here, I have to answer the question. Certainly, I think right now, with all the equipment and everything we have, that number's probably in the high 50s, probably tops out at about 60 feet. The flip side of this, which I also get, is, well, I'm just getting started, and what size boat should my wife and I and my family, what should we get to get started with? And my stock answer to that is, don't start with the boat that's too small. You start with an 18-foot day sailor or a 22-foot, you start with an 18-foot day sailor. Right off the bat, the boat has no head. So now you're limited by your distance is quantified by the amount of liquids that your family or your spouse, whoever, consumes right before you leave, because you can't go very, very far on a day sailor. So you need a boat with a head. But small boats, you know, and I'm talking, when I say small, I'm talking about under 25-foot boats, are a little harder to handle than a 35-foot boat. I know what that sounds like. I know what that sounds like, but it's true, all right? Because a 25-foot boat, you're jerking around with an outboard engine, which makes docking a real adventure sometimes because you got to reach off the back and hold the tiller, and you're holding the tiller between your legs, and you're trying to start the outboard and hope like hell it starts. You know, people move around in boats, and especially if you've got kids, because they get bored and they start moving around, and the boat gets a little tippy, and you get hit with a puff of wind, and everything tips over. So there's a, never mind, you know, maybe too big as 60 feet, but you start getting too small, and you're right at the opposite end of the equation. And unfortunately, a lot of people, because obviously you think, my God, I don't want to start with a big boat. I don't know how to sail. I've done very little sailing, whatever it is. I don't want to get a boat too big. I won't, you know, if you get a boat too small, it can become a very, very discouraging experience. Everybody gets upset, and you've got the cockpit's too crowded, and you're bouncing around, and all the things that I just mentioned. So you got two issues at this thing. So too small is no good. All right. Too big can be very, very hard. Just with docking, by the way, and maneuvering in and around marinas. The marinas are very, very tight, and they're even worse in Europe if you get over there, because it's all stern to Mediterranean waters, and I'll talk about that at another time. So I would say that, you know, for the average people getting involved in this thing, you know, 35 to 40 feet. And I know some people watching this are going to say, wow, that's awful big. And I understand that, but it's really not. You'll be amazed at how fast that boat will become very, very comfortable to you. And most of all, it becomes comfortable to the folks that you're sailing with, whether you're just sailing with your girlfriend, you're sailing with your wife, or you're sailing with a couple of kids or whatever. If they're not comfortable and they're not happy, they're not enjoying the experience. And thus, you know, if you don't keep everybody around you comfortable and not nervous and jumpy and spooky and things slamming and banging, then you're going to be single-handing, because you're going to be sailing all by yourself, because nobody's going to want to sail with you. And that happens a lot. And I think one of the reasons why golf is boomed in my working lifetime is that the boats have become too difficult for folks to sail, and their families are not happy, and thus they don't want to do this anymore. So it's important that you be able to include everybody and make them comfortable. So my fast answer to a very, very difficult question is less than 60 feet and bigger than 25 feet.